Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to walk you through my process for creating a watercolor galaxy effect using just Photoshop. So this is taught using traditional watercolors, but I thought it would be fun to also recreate it in Photoshop to show you how simple it is also in Photoshop. So what you see on screen is the exact outcome of this tutorial. I'm going to walk you through all the steps on how to get here. And this is a little bit more of an advanced tutorial, so I'm not going to take as much time to walk through every detail as I usually do, just because there's a lot to cover here. So if you are looking for some more intro or beginner style Photoshop tutorials, definitely click the link in the video description and you can get more information there. I've also listed all of the resources for creating this. If you click on that link in the video description, you can have access to every single thing that's mentioned throughout this video. So all that said, we're just going to jump in and get started. So you can see I've got kind of a pinkish purple outcome right here. You can also do this as green, you can do it as blue, you can do whatever color you want. So it's really versatile and it's also just really fun to make. So we're just going to get started. So this lettering is just me writing it out with a regular brush pen, and then I scanned it in. So this is how it started right here. So this is what we're going to work with first, and we're going to take it from here to here. So the first thing we want to do is just enhance the black and the white to add more contrast before we remove the white. It'll just make for softer edges and less like pixelated edges later on. So what I like to do is I come over here, select my levels from my adjustment palette, and then I just toggle my black to the right and my white to the left, but I don't want to make it grainy, so there's definitely kind of a fine line there. So just find a good middle ground. This feels pretty good to me. And then I'll also come over here to my brightness and contrast. I'll up my contrast and then I'll reduce my brightness. So I'm actually making it darker, and that'll just help me to make a more accurate selection when I'm removing the white. So once this is all set, I'm kind of using a destructive form of editing here because I don't need to add anything back to this later on, so it's totally okay for me in this one scenario. Typically, I do non-destructive editing all the time, but for this case, I don't really need it. So I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, move along a lot quicker by eliminating that. So double click on my background, I'm gonna group all these together and then merge them. And then to remove all the white, I hit W on my keyboard, grab my magic wand, and then go select similar, so all of the white on the entire piece is selected, and then delete it. And then from here, I want to make sure I don't have any tonal grays through here. I want it all to be black, but because we made those enhancements, the edges are much more realistic. They're less pixelated than they would have been otherwise. So in order to make this all black, I just add a color overlay layer style to it. So double click on here, color overlay, make it black. So I just have zeros all the way across down here for my hex, and then hit OK. So you can see some of the edges still are a bit rough, but I think they're going to be okay once we get into the watercolor. They'd be far worse if we didn't do those brightness and levels earlier. So from here, now we can start working on our document. So I want to make sure that this is centered first. So let me move it over just a tad. That feels a little better here. Or you can just bring it into a new layout if you'd like. So then from here, I'm going to add a black background layer. So just create a new layer, bring it down here in your layers palette. I've got black selected right here, true black. So I'm just going to do that. And then actually, you know what? Let's make this a little less than true black. So it's just a little bit gray. It'll help with our stars that we bring in. So as you can see right here, I've got these stars, and what I did with this is I actually just brought in a free stock photo and then just changed the blend mode, and it's a really quick and easy way to get this effect. So I also have the link to this photo in the video description, so click there, and it is this one right here. So all I'm going to do is just drag it over into Photoshop and it'll pop it right in right here just like this, and I might need to scale it down a little bit. Yeah, it's monstrous. So that feels like a pretty good scale right here. And then just make sure it's above your black layer. You want to make sure you've got a black layer below this so the effect works. So then you just want to change your blend mode, and you want to select color dodge. So select that, and then you'll get that nice effect right there. So it's a little too bright when you do that, so I just like knocking down the opacity to 50%, and that feels a little more believable. Actually, 60 might feel good too. Let's do 60. That looks good. Okay, so now we start having fun with our watercolors to get this effect really going for us. So you're just going to select any watercolor texture that you like. I'm using a watercolor texture from my kit, Watercolor Texture Kit Volume 3. So I'm just going to File, Place. So there's a lot of different colors and textures to pick from out of this kit. I've got two other kits as well. So let's play around with a new kind of color than one that I've done before. We want to make sure that it's got a lot of different variations in it. I think this one feels pretty good. It's kind of moody with this teal color. I like that. So this is number 14 out of this kit. So I'm going to hit place. And I just want to make sure that it's covering all of my words when I place it on top. And this one appears to be. So that's looking pretty good. So let me just scale it. That feels good. And in order for this clipping mask to work that we want to apply, you want to make sure that the layer style that we applied, this black layer style to our lettering, is rasterized. Otherwise the clipping mask won't work. So just come over here, right click, rasterize layer style, and now we can create a clipping mask out of this watercolor texture. So right click and then create clipping mask, and that will pop it right in there. So that's looking really good, but we want a little bit more variation. You can see we've got a bunch more variation right here with the different textures of the watercolor on our lettering. So if you'd like that as well, all you're going to do is duplicate this texture. So I'm just going to hold Alt and click and drag, and I can drag out another one, and then I can also reduce the size of it and kind of rotate it a little bit so I get some nice edges showing up. And if this looks good to you with just these additional edges around here, that's fine. If you want to add a little extra punch to it, just change the blend mode from this to color burn, and then you want to reduce the opacity of it to like 50%, and that usually looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go down to, let's see what 30 looks like. 30 is good. So that just gives me a little more variation and gives it a little more darkness, so it feels more as part of the scene right here. So that looks good. So the next thing we need to do is just create a little more moodiness by grabbing our layer right here, our original lettering layer, and I'm just going to hold Alt, click, and drag it above here, and it's just going to be a little extra darkness, which will help when we start putting our stars on top of our lettering. So we're going to change our blend mode to overlay for this, so it'll punch up some of that color, but this is definitely too severe, so we're just going to change the opacity to like 20 or 30%. And you can see if I turn this on and off, the change right here, which will just make those stars that we're going to put on top of it right here, you can see they'll pop off of it a little bit more and feel more like a galaxy. So it helps. So from here, now the next thing we're going to do is bring in those stars. Let me apply a clipping mask right here. I don't want to forget. Okay, so for the stars, what I like to do, you can paint them with just a soft brush if you'd like, but I've got some free splatter textures. I'll show you them right here, and I'll leave a link to this as well. And they're super handy, and they kind of, because there's so much variety in the shape of these splatters, they feel more natural like stars. So I like using these, even though you could totally use a brush if you'd prefer. So I have already downloaded those. And I actually like this first one a little better, but you can use whatever ones you want. These are totally free. And I'm just going to drag these into here, but I also need to change, you can see they're black right now, I need to change them to white, and I also want to add an outer glow to them so they feel more star-like. So let me scale this down a little bit because I want to make sure that they're really obvious on the letters that they're going on. Okay, so I'm going to apply a layer style to this, so double click, and then color overlay first for the white. So I'm just going to change this to direct white. And then also apply in outer glow. So outer glow, make sure that this color is changed to white right here. We don't want it to be gray. Okay. Okay, so that looks good. So I've got 30% opacity, blend mode is screen, spread is 12%, and size is 13 pixels. So hit OK. And now that we have these, we're just going to apply clipping mask. And now we can just duplicate these, and we can rescale, we can rotate, and we can just make sure that we're getting a fair amount of little off in the distant stars that are glowing on all of these letters. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit and rescale it. So we've got some good variety here, so it feels a little more realistic. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And if you'd also like to alter some of the opacities of these, sometimes I'll just come in here and holding Command, I'll select some just random layers like this, and then just alter the opacity just slightly just to add a little more variation. So I've knocked this down to 70%. So that looks really good, but it will help to have some star shapes in here. So I just create my own brush out of that. So then I'll just go File, New, and I'll create a new document that's 200 pixels by 200 pixels. We can change this to 300. If you want to print this later, hit OK. And then in this document, I'll create a new layer, and grab my pen tool and make sure that it's shape that's selected right here, and I want it to be a black shape, so make sure this is switched, and then I'll just draw out like a really basic star right here that I can then use as like a brush in my galaxy lettering. So that looks pretty good. I could probably make this one a little longer. Okay, so I'll just select this, hold Command and then click, or Control click, and then go Edit, Define Brush Preset, and I can just do star and hit OK, and then I can return back over here, hit B on my keyboard, and let me create a new layer. And now I've got a brush, and I want this to be white. So I'm going to zoom in here, reduce the size using your open bracket key on your keyboard and increase it with your close bracket key on your keyboard. And then I'm just going to stamp this around throughout my different letters. And it's okay to go off the edges of them because we're going to apply a clipping mask to this, so they'll get locked within the letters in the end. Okay, so what we're going to do is also apply the same layer style. So right click on the layer style, copy layer style, and then paste it on here. And now it's got a glow on this as well, but it seems a little extreme. So let's reduce this a little bit. I'm going to bring this down to like 15 and then maybe go down to 10 and 9 here. Okay, and then right click, create clipping mask, and now that's locked inside all of our letters. And you can stop right there if you want. This is all set and good to go. But if you'd like to add a little extra depth like I have on these letters, I'll show you how to quickly and easily do that. So I just create a new layer, grab my brush tool, but I want this one to be a soft brush. So click the first one right here, and you just want to make sure that the hardness is set at 0% up here. And then I'm just going to make this a little bit larger. And then I come through my different letters. You want to select the letters so it's kind of locking those shadow areas within the letters. So all you have to do is Command or Control click on your lettering layer, but make sure that this new layer is selected. And then when you brush, you want to, make sure it's black. So let me hit X to switch this. So it's black right here. And then I'm just going to brush very softly around those edges where I want the black to appear. And I'm going to erase the black out of the center part later. These edges right here are what matter to me right now, these areas in shadow. And I'll do a more comprehensive tutorial on how I do this. I'm just kind of doing it quick as a finishing step here for this style. So that looks good. And then I'm just going to erase away those extra areas. So now I can come in with my eraser tool, and I like making it a hard brush. So I make sure my hardness is all the way to 100 right here. And then I can come in and erase away those areas that I don't need, but I still have that softness of the shadow where I do need it. Okay, so now that I've got those shadows put in, I can deselect this, and then I can just change this to overlay. So that'll give me some darkness, and I can actually create another layer right here too to give it a little more darkness, but reduce the opacity to like 30%. Okay, so that's how to create a watercolor galaxy effect in Photoshop, just by using a few textures, creating your own brush, and applying a few different layer styles. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design tutorial every single Tuesday, and don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design tutorials and a bunch of design freebies. And make sure you hit the link in the video description, and you'll have access to everything that was used within this video to create your own. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week.